The massive space station that housed the Galactic Federation Engineering Academy glowed like a silver jewel against the backdrop of swirling nebula gases. Samantha Wells pressed her face against the viewport of the transport shuttle, her green eyes wide with wonder. After 3 years of grueling tests, language studies, and physiological evaluations, she had finally made it. The first human accepted into the most prestigious engineering program in the known universe. Approaching docking. Bay 7, announced the shuttle's AI in a pleasant voice. Please prepare for artificial gravity adjustment. Station gravity is set at 0.7 Earth standard. Samantha took a deep breath and checked her bag one last time. Her hands trembled slightly, though she wasn't sure if it was from excitement or fear. The Academy had sent multiple warnings about the environment being potentially uncomfortable for her death world physiology, as they called it. Humans came from a planet with higher gravity, more extreme weather, and greater biodiversity than most civilized worlds. What Earth considered normal, the galactic community considered brutally harsh. The shuttle docked with a gentle hiss of equalizing pressure. Samantha stood, immediately noticing the lightness in her step from the reduced gravity. She had trained for this in simulation chambers back on Earth, but the real experience made her feel almost bouncy. "Welcome to the Academy, Student Wells," said a tall, willowy being waiting at the airlock. Its skin had a bluish tint that reminded Samantha of shallow ocean water, and its 4 arms moved with graceful precision as it consulted a hovering data display. "I am Administrative Assistant Elora. We have made special accommodations for your unique requirements." Samantha smiled and extended her hand before remembering the cultural briefing. Many species found direct physical contact alarming or even offensive. She quickly converted the gesture into a respectful bow. "Thank you for the welcome. I'm excited to be here." Elora led her through corridors filled with beings of all shapes and sizes. Some floated in personal atmosphere bubbles, others slithered along on multiple appendages, and a few appeared to be made of living crystal. Students parted as Samantha walked by, their conversations dropping to whispers. She caught fragments of translated speech in her earpiece. From a gravity well of 9.8 meters per second, breathes nitrogen-oxygen mixture voluntarily, can withstand temperature variations of 50 degrees in a single-day cycle. Elora stopped at a door marked with symbols Samantha recognized as her name in standard galactic script. "These are your quarters. We've reinforced the sleeping platform for your density and installed an atmosphere regulator that can reproduce your planet's air composition. Classes begin tomorrow at first rotation." Left alone in her room, Samantha sat on the edge of her bed, which barely gave under her weight. The room was spacious, but sparse, with strange proportions that made her feel slightly off balance. A large window looked out into the star-filled void, with a gas giant slowly rotating in the distance. Her communication pad chimed. A message from Professor Zix Thune, her assigned academic advisor. "Student Wells, report to Laboratory 7 for preliminary assessment. Immediate." The laboratory was easy to find with her station map. The door slid open to reveal a cavernous room filled with equipment she only partially recognized. In the center stood Professor Zix Thune, an imposing figure with 8 limbs that moved with precise, efficient motions. His exoskeleton gleamed under the bright lights, and the multiple compound eyes on his head swiveled to track her entrance. "So," his translator produced a slightly mechanical voice, "you are the Deathworlder." It wasn't a question. "I'm Samantha Wells from Earth," she responded, keeping her voice steady. "I'm honored to join your advanced materials class. Honor is irrelevant. Capability is what matters." The professor manipulated a control panel, and a holographic display of Earth appeared between them. "Your world has 1.4 times the gravity of our Academy standard. Your atmospheric pressure is higher than 15% of our student species can tolerate. Your daily temperature variations would kill 23% of our student body." Samantha swallowed hard. "We've adapted to our environment." "Indeed. That is why you are here." Professor Zix Thune's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. The board was reluctant to admit a species from such an extreme world. They feared you would be too Primitive. I argued in favor of your admission. That surprised Samantha. You did? Species that evolve on challenging worlds often develop unique perspectives. Engineering is about adapting to constraints. Your kind has faced more constraints than most. He gestured to a workbench. Show me how you would approach this problem. The hologram changed to display a material stress analysis. Samantha recognized it as a fairly standard engineering challenge. Though the materials were unfamiliar, she stepped forward and began working through the problem, aware of the professor's unblinking gaze. After her assessment, Samantha made her way to the station's common area, where students gathered between classes. The room fell quiet as she entered. She took a deep breath and walked to an empty table, feeling the weight of stares from dozens of alien eyes. A crystalline being approached her table, its translucent body refracting light in beautiful patterns. May I join you? The translation came through her earpiece. Of course, Samantha said, grateful for the company. I am Keldor. The being introduced itself, settling carefully onto a seat. You solved Professor Zixthun's preliminary assessment. Few do so on their first attempt. Samantha blinked in surprise. News travels fast. The Academy communication network is efficient. Keldor's body shifted, creating a tinkling sound like wind chimes. Many students are discussing the human who can withstand forces that would shatter most species. I'm just adapted to my home environment, Samantha explained. Earth isn't special, it's just different. Different enough that most here consider it deadly. Keldor leaned closer. Is it true that your oceans cover most of your planet with dihydrogen monoxide that falls regularly from your atmosphere? Samantha couldn't help but smile. We call it water and rain, and yes, we have storms where water falls from the sky, sometimes very heavily. Several nearby students had moved closer to listen. One gasped audibly. And you survive this? Asked a floating jellyfish-like creature. We enjoy it, Samantha replied. Some humans even dance in the rain. This caused such a stir that station security briefly checked on the commotion. By evening, Samantha had become the center of an impromptu cultural exchange, explaining Earth phenomena that she had always taken for granted. Seasons, earthquakes, immunization against diseases, and the concept of physical sports. As she finally returned to her quarters exhausted from the day's events and the constant translation effort, her communication pad chimed again. It was a message from Professor Zixthun. Your assessment results were acceptable. Your explanations of practical applications showed unexpected insight. Perhaps there is value in the Deathworld perspective after all. Samantha smiled as she prepared for sleep. It was just one day, but it was a start. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, she had made her first small step toward proving humanity's worth in the stars. The lights dimmed automatically as she lay on her reinforced bed, gazing out at the unfamiliar stars that would be her home for the next 3 years. 2 months passed quickly at the Galactic Federation Engineering Academy. Samantha Wells had settled into a routine that no longer felt so alien. The reduced gravity still made her feel springy, but she had learned to control her movements. Her classmates no longer stared openly when she entered a room, though they still watched with interest when she effortlessly lifted objects that would strain their physiologies. Samantha sat in Professor Zixthun's Advanced Materials Laboratory, surrounded by students of 15 different species. She had learned all their names, though pronouncing some remained challenging. Keldor sat nearby, the crystalline being's surface catching the light as it shifted position. Attention! Professor Zixthun's voice cut through the quiet murmurs of the class. His 8 limbs moved in complex patterns as he operated the room's holographic projector. Today I announce your midterm practical assignment. A collective tension filled the room. Professor Zixthun was known for his difficult assignments. You will design and build a functional emergency habitat, the professor continued. This habitat must protect its occupant from extreme environmental conditions for a minimum of 26 standard hours. Excited whispers spread through the classroom. This seemed straightforward enough. Emergency habitats were standard engineering exercises. There is, however, a condition, Professor Zixthun added, mandibles clicking. You must personally test your habitat under simulator conditions. The excitement turned to horror. One gelatinous student near the front quivered so violently that small droplets of its body splashed onto the desk. The simulation will include temperature variations, radiation exposure, atmospheric pressure changes, and gravitational stress, the professor continued calmly. The exact conditions will remain unknown until testing begins. Samantha felt a surge of confidence. While her classmates viewed this as a terrifying challenge, humans had been building shelters against Earth's harsh and unpredictable environments for thousands of years. From Arctic research stations to desert survival shelters, this was something her species understood well. After class, students gathered in panicked groups in the common area. Samantha found herself approached by Keldor and 3 other students. Nevi, a 6-legged being with copper-colored fur, Zoral, who resembled a floating jellyfish, and Plex, a robotic entity housing a gaseous intelligence. Samantha, Keldor's translated voice held a note of desperation. You do not seem concerned about the assignment, she smiled. On Earth, we deal with extreme environments all the time. Humans live in places where temperatures drop below freezing or rise to scorching levels. We build shelters in deserts, oceans, and even on mountains with thin air. You willingly inhabit such places? Nevi's fur stood on end with shock. We not only survive there, we explore them for fun, Samantha explained. We call it adventure travel or extreme sports. The group stared at her in stunned silence. Perhaps, Plex suggested, mechanical eyes focusing. You could explain your approach to this assignment? Samantha opened her datapad and pulled up some basic Earth survival shelter designs she had brought from home. The key is redundancy and simplicity. Everything that can fail will fail. We call this Murphy's Law on Earth. So we build backup systems and manual overrides. As she explained basic Earth survival techniques, layered insulation, water collection systems, oxygen circulation, temperature, regulation, a crowd of students gathered around. Even species that had previously avoided the dangerous Deathworlder listened with growing interest. The most important part, Samantha concluded, is building for worst-case scenarios, not optimal conditions. But that is so inefficient, objected a tall, reed-thin student named Vril. Galactic standard engineering teaches us to design for optimal functionality. Optimal doesn't help when everything goes wrong, Samantha replied. On Earth, we learned this lesson through disasters and accidents. Now we plan for failure. The next day, Samantha began work on her habitat design. She incorporated principles from Earth's Arctic exploration pods, deep-sea habitats, and high-altitude shelters, while other students created elegant minimal designs with complex technological systems. Samantha's habitat looked almost primitive by comparison. Thicker walls, manual backup systems, and redundant life support. Professor Zixthun observed her work silently for several minutes before speaking. Your design uses twice the materials of your classmates. Yes, Professor, Samantha acknowledged. Earth engineering often prioritizes survivability over efficiency. You are building as if expecting disaster, he noted, compound eyes shifting. I'm building as if I can't afford disaster, she corrected. Humans learned long ago that elegant solutions fail elegantly. Sometimes ugly solutions that refuse to fail are better. The professor's mandibles clicked rapidly. A sound Samantha had learned indicated deep thought. Your species evolved on a world that tried to kill you regularly. We don't usually think of it that way, Samantha said with a smile. But yes, Earth has hurricanes, earthquakes, blizzards, droughts, floods, and more. We adapt. Perhaps there is wisdom in this approach, Professor Zixthun admitted before moving on to inspect other students' work. As the project deadline approached, Samantha put the finishing touches on her habitat pod. Unlike the gleaming, minimal constructions of her classmates, her habitat was bulky, with visible backup systems and manual controls. Some students joked that it looked like a primitive box compared to their elegant designs. But Samantha remained Confident, Keldor approached as she ran final checks. I have incorporated some of your redundancy principles into my design, the crystalline being admitted. My species cannot withstand temperature variations like humans can. That's smart, Samantha encouraged. Better to have systems you don't need than to need systems you don't have. News of the Deathworld approach spread throughout the engineering department. Several students modified their designs, adding elements of redundancy and manual overrides. Others maintained that the elegant, efficient galactic standard was superior. Professor Zixthun overheard Samantha explaining Earth survival principles to a group of fascinated students in the fabrication lab. He watched as she demonstrated how simple mechanical systems could replace complex electronic ones in emergency situations. On Earth, she explained, we've learned that complexity creates points of failure. Sometimes the simplest solution is the most reliable. Later that evening, as Samantha returned to her quarters, she received a message from Professor Zixthun. Your methodology contradicts standard teaching, yet it contains logic I cannot dismiss. Tomorrow, we will begin habitat testing. I find myself curious whether Deathworld engineering principles will prove their worth. Samantha smiled as she prepared for sleep. Tomorrow would be the real test, when theory met practice. As a human from Earth, she knew all too well that no plan survived contact with reality unchanged. But adaptation was humanity's greatest strength, and she was ready to show the galaxy what Deathworlders could do. The testing day for the emergency habitats arrived with a buzz of nervous energy throughout the academy. Students gathered in the large simulator chamber, their completed habitats arranged in a circle. Each structure reflected the design philosophy of its creator. Some were sleek and minimalist, others complex with visible technology, and Samantha's stood out with its sturdy, practical appearance. Professor Zixthun entered the chamber, accompanied by several academy officials. Today, we evaluate your emergency habitats under stress conditions, he announced. Each habitat will face conditions that might be encountered in a real emergency. You will remain inside your creation during testing. Samantha checked her habitat one last time, making sure all systems were functioning. While other students frantically ran last-minute diagnostics on their complex environmental regulators, she focused on ensuring her manual overrides were accessible and her backup systems ready. Student Wells, Professor Zixthun approached her. Your habitat will be tested last. I am curious to see how Deathworld engineering performs. Before Samantha could respond, a loud alarm echoed through the station. Red emergency lights began to flash along the corridors. Station alert, announced the Academy AI system. Minor hull breach detected in Educational Sector 7. Emergency protocols activated. Professor Zixthun's communication device buzzed. He listened intently, his compound eyes shifting rapidly. Testing is postponed, he announced. All students return to quarters immediately. This is not part of the exercise. As students began moving toward the exit, a shuddering vibration ran through the floor. The lights flickered, then dimmed to emergency level. The temperature in the room noticeably dropped. Update, the AI voice had changed to a more urgent tone. Station stabilization system damaged by micrometeoroid impact. Multiple system failures detected. Please proceed to evacuation points. Chaos erupted as students rushed toward the exits. Samantha moved with them until another violent shake knocked several students off their feet. The main door to the simulator, chamber sealed shut automatically. Containment protocol engaged, announced the AI. Atmosphere leak detected. Please remain calm. Engineering teams dispatched. Samantha helped a fallen student up, Nevi, whose copper fur now stood on end with fear. The temperature continued to drop rapidly, and Samantha could see her breath, forming clouds in the increasingly thin air. The emergency systems have isolated this section due to pressure loss, Professor Zixthun explained, his voice steady despite the situation. We must wait for rescue teams. Samantha looked around at her classmates. Many were already showing signs of distress from the cold and thinning atmosphere. Several species began to move sluggishly, their metabolisms unable to cope with the dropping temperature. Professor, she said, We don't need to wait. We have 15 emergency habitats right here. Professor Zixthun's mandibles clicked rapidly. Most are untested and designed for single occupants of specific species. Mine isn't, Samantha replied. I built it with extra capacity and broader environmental tolerances. Earth habitats are designed to handle multiple emergency scenarios at once. Without waiting for a response, she moved to her habitat and began activating its systems. Keldor, Nivi, help me, she called. We need to modify this to support multiple species. As the air grew thinner and colder, Samantha worked quickly. While her classmates struggled in the deteriorating conditions, she continued functioning. Her Earth-evolved physiology allowing her to withstand the environmental changes far longer. How are you still moving so efficiently? Gasped Zoral, the jellyfish-like student who had begun to collapse in on itself as the pressure dropped. Humans evolved to handle environmental stress, Samantha explained while working. We can keep functioning in conditions far from our comfort zone. A voice came from the chamber entrance. Hello, is anyone there? It was Alex Porter, another human student from the biochemistry department peering through the emergency viewport. Alex, Samantha called. The door's sealed. We need help getting these students to safety. Working on it, Alex replied. The regular systems are locked down, but I might be able to manually override from this side. While Alex worked on the door, Samantha continued modifying her habitat. She removed internal walls to create more space and reconfigured the life support system to accommodate different breathing requirements. This won't be comfortable, she told the increasingly distressed students, but it will keep you alive until help arrives. Professor Zixthun watched as she worked barehanded in the freezing air. You are not wearing protective gear, he observed, his own exoskeleton beginning to stiffen in the cold. Don't have time, Samantha replied, her fingers moving quickly, despite being red and painful from the cold. Humans can endure discomfort when necessary. With Keldor's help, Samantha began moving the most vulnerable students into her modified habitat. The internal temperature stabilized and the atmosphere thickened to breathable levels. Meanwhile, Alex had removed an access panel beside the sealed door and was manually rewiring the emergency systems. This would be easier with proper tools. He called through the viewport. Check my bag by the door, Samantha shouted back. I always carry a multi-tool. Alex found the tool and continued working, his breath frosting in the corridor's air. Almost got it, he muttered. Just need to bypass the safety protocol without triggering the secondary lockdown. Inside the chamber, half the students were now inside Samantha's habitat, while the others huddled nearby, watching in amazement as the two humans continued to function in conditions that had left them barely able to move. Your physiology is remarkable, Professor Zixthun said quietly to Samantha. But more impressive is your preparation and adaptability. The door suddenly hissed and slid open a few inches. That's all I can manage, Alex called, straining to hold the manual override in place. The mechanical system is damaged. It's enough, Samantha replied. She turned to the students who could still move. Let's get everyone through, the weakest first. Working together, they began evacuating the chamber, squeezing through the partially opened door. Academy security teams met them in the corridor beyond, providing emergency thermal blankets and breathing assistance. When everyone else was safe, Samantha and Alex remained behind to collect the emergency gear from the habitats that might help others throughout the station. Standard procedure on Earth missions, Alex explained to a curious security officer. Salvage what you can, improvise with what you have. Later, in the Academy's medical center, Professor Zixthun addressed the assembled engineering students. Today, you witnessed practical engineering in a real emergency. While most of our elegant designs remained untested, Student Wells' approach, which many considered primitive, proved its worth. He turned to Samantha, who was having her frostbitten fingers treated. The Death World perspective on engineering prioritizes survival above all. There is much we can learn from this approach. The Academy board members, who had come to check on the students, murmured among themselves. One stepped forward. We are most impressed not just that the humans survived, but that they could still think clearly and perform complex tasks under conditions we consider lethal emergency situations. Samantha smiled tiredly. On Earth we have a saying, hope for the best, plan for the worst. Today was just the worst. Tomorrow we'll be back to building better emergency habitats. As news of the incident spread throughout the station, students from other departments came to hear the story of how the Deathworlders had saved their classmates. By evening, the Academy's communication network was filled with discussions about Earth engineering and its applications in emergency scenarios. Professor Zix-Thune sent Samantha a message before she fell asleep. Rest well, Student Wells. Tomorrow, we begin rewriting the engineering curriculum. The galaxy has much to learn from Deathworlders. The Academy changed after the station incident. 2 weeks had passed and Samantha noticed a shift in how students and professors treated humans. Where once they had been viewed with caution as dangerous Deathworlders, now they were sought out for their insights. The word Deathworlder began to sound more like a title of respect than a term of concern. Samantha sat in a newly established lecture hall, watching as Professor Zix-Thune addressed a crowd 3 times larger than his usual class. Students from departments beyond engineering filled every seat, with some even standing along the walls. Today we begin a special lecture series, announced the professor, his 8 limbs moving with excitement. The Academy Board has approved a curriculum edition, Deathworld Engineering Principles. Murmurs spread through the audience. This was unprecedented. Curriculum changes usually took years to approve. Following recent events, Professor Zix-Thune continued, we recognize that our standard approach to engineering has significant gaps. We design for optimal conditions rather than worst-case scenarios. This must change. He gestured toward Samantha. Student Wells will assist me in presenting these concepts. Samantha walked to the front of the hall, still surprised by her new status. Her habitat design, once mocked as bulky and primitive, was now displayed prominently in the engineering department as an example of robust emergency design. Thank you, Professor, she began. On Earth, we have a concept called Murphy's Law. It states that anything that can go wrong will go wrong eventually. Our engineering reflects this mindset. For the next hour, Samantha explained basic Earth engineering principles that she had always taken for granted. Redundant systems, fail-safe mechanisms, manual overrides, and designing for extreme conditions rather than ideal ones. In most galactic engineering, she explained, systems are optimized for efficiency under normal conditions. On Earth, we optimize for functionality under the worst possible conditions. A student raised an appendage. But this approach uses more resources and creates less elegant solutions. True, Samantha nodded. But when systems fail, elegance becomes irrelevant. Survival matters more. After the lecture, Alex Porter joined Samantha in the common area. Since the emergency, the 2 humans had become minor celebrities at the Academy. Other students constantly approached them with questions about Earth. The biochemistry department wants me to explain human medical emergency responses tomorrow, Alex told her, sitting down with a tray of food. Apparently, our ability to stabilize injured people without advanced technology is considered remarkable. It's strange, Samantha mused. The things we take for granted on Earth seem revolutionary here. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Professor Zix-Thune, accompanied by 3 members of the Academy Board. All students in the common area stood respectfully. Student Wells, Student Porter. The professor addressed them formally. The Academy Board wishes to discuss a proposal with you. The highest-ranking board member stepped forward. She resembled a tall, willowy plant with iridescent leaves that shimmered with each movement. We have been evaluating the recent emergency response, she said. Your actions saved lives and prevented greater damage to the station. Samantha shifted, uncomfortably. We just did what anyone from Earth would do in that situation. Precisely our point, the board member continued. What seems ordinary for Deathworlders represents an entirely different approach to crisis management. We wish to establish a permanent course on Earth engineering methodologies, with both of you as consulting instructors. Alex nearly choked on his drink. Us? Teaching? But we're still students ourselves. Sometimes the best teachers are those who naturally embody the principles, Professor Zixthun explained. Your instinctive responses demonstrated concepts our most experienced engineers failed to consider. Over the following days, Samantha and Alex worked with Professor Zixthun to develop a course outline. They struggled at first to articulate concepts they had absorbed through cultural osmosis. On Earth, how do we teach something that's just common sense to us? Samantha asked, staring at their draft syllabus. Common sense is merely cultural programming, Professor Zixthun replied. What seems obvious to you represents a paradigm shift for species from more stable worlds. As they worked, news arrived that Samantha's modified habitat design had passed all official testing scenarios. The Academy's Engineering Guild formally recognized her approach as a new standard for emergency systems. Meanwhile, students began incorporating Earth-inspired elements into their projects across various departments. The medical lab started researching human physiological adaptations to stress. The architecture division began redesigning critical station systems with redundancy principles. One evening, Samantha returned to her quarters to find a notification on her data pad. Her habitat project, the one interrupted by the real emergency, had been evaluated officially. Despite never completing the formal test, she had received the highest mark in the class. The comment section simply read, "Practical demonstration exceeded all testing parameters." Later that week, Samantha stood beside her habitat, which remained in the testing chamber. Professor Zixthun had arranged a special demonstration for Academy officials. Today, the professor explained to the gathered dignitaries, "We will subject this habitat to conditions considered immediately fatal for 90% of galactic species." Screens displayed the planned testing parameters: extreme temperature fluctuations, radiation exposure, atmospheric pressure changes, and gravitational stress far beyond safety standards. Samantha entered her habitat and sealed the door. Through the viewport, she could see the officials watching with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Some still didn't believe a living being could survive such conditions. As the test began, sensors monitored both the habitat and Samantha's vital signs. The external temperature plummeted to levels that would freeze most species solid. The atmosphere thinned to what many would consider vacuum. Radiation levels rose to what galactic standards classified as immediately harmful. Inside the habitat, Samantha calmly read a book on her datapad. The officials watched in astonishment as her vital signs remained stable. The habitat's simple, robust systems maintained a survivable internal environment, despite the hellish conditions outside. After 30 minutes, longer than the required testing time, Professor Zixthun ended the demonstration. When Samantha emerged, looking completely unaffected, a ripple of amazed conversation spread through the audience. The habitat performed as designed, she explained simply. Earth standards require emergency systems to function under much worse conditions than this. One official, a being composed of swirling gases contained in a protective field, approached her. "You appeared completely at ease during the test. Were you not concerned about system failure?" Samantha smiled. "The habitat has 3 levels of backup for every critical system, and manual controls if all else fails. On Earth, we design as if our lives depend on it, because they often do." That evening, the Academy Board announced a major evaluation of all safety and emergency systems throughout the station. Teams were formed to implement Deathworld-inspired redundancies in critical areas. Professor Zixthun sent Samantha a message. "The galaxy has long viewed worlds like Earth as dangerous anomalies. Perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps such challenging environments create exactly the kind of thinking we need to advance. Tomorrow we continue rewriting the curriculum." As Samantha prepared for sleep, she reflected on how quickly things had changed. Her primitive approach, once deemed outdated and inelegant, was now considered revolutionary. Sometimes, she thought, the harshest teachers create the most valuable lessons. Earth had taught humanity to survive against the odds, and now that lesson was spreading to the stars. As the academic year approached its end, the Galactic Federation Engineering Academy had transformed. Signs of the Earth approach appeared everywhere, from redesigned safety systems to new course offerings. What began with one human student's different perspective had grown into a movement that spread throughout the institution. Samantha Wells walked through the main engineering lab, now bustling with activity as students prepared their final projects. The room looked different from when she had first arrived. Workstations now featured manual backup controls alongside sophisticated interfaces. Emergency equipment hung in easily accessible locations. Even the station's atmospheric systems had been modified with redundant backups based on her designs. "Student Wells," called Professor Zixthun from across the lab. "Please join us." Samantha made her way to where the professor stood with a group of visitors wearing formal Galactic Engineering Guild insignia. She recognized the Guild's leadership council, the most respected engineers in the known galaxy. "This is the student I mentioned," Professor Zixthun told them. "Her perspective sparked our curriculum revolution." The Guild leader, a tall being with silvery skin that seemed to flow like mercury, regarded Samantha with multifaceted eyes. "We have reviewed the reports of your work," they said. "Most interesting. We rarely see such fundamental challenges to established methodology." "I didn't set out to challenge anything," Samantha replied honestly. "I just applied what we consider basic principles on Earth. Sometimes the most profound changes come from the simplest observations," the Guild leader noted. "We have come to formally recognize the Earth approach as a distinct engineering discipline worthy of study throughout the Federation." This news stunned Samantha. Guild recognition normally took decades of proven application and peer review. She had only been at the Academy for one academic year. "The emergency incident provided unexpected but compelling evidence," explained another Guild member. 17 lives saved by principles our standard curricula dismissed as outdated." Professor Zixthun's mandibles clicked in what Samantha now recognized as pride. "We have established a permanent exchange program with Earth universities. 3 more human students arrive next semester, and we will send 5 of our students to study on Earth." After the Guild representatives departed, Samantha found Alex Porter in the common area, working with a group of students from various departments. Since the emergency incident, 5 more humans had been recruited mid-year to join the Academy. Each brought their own expertise, but all shared the same Deathworld perspective that had proven so valuable. "The final exam assignments were just announced," Alex told her excitedly. "Professor Zixthun has completely redesigned the challenge." Later that day, students gathered for the announcement of the final examination. Professor Zixthun stood before the assembled engineering class, which had grown significantly with students from other departments who had transferred into the newly popular discipline. "Your final examination will be different this year," the guide professor announced. "Instead of traditional theoretical exercises, you will complete a practical challenge. Each team must include at least one approach from a Deathworld species in your designs." Excited discussion broke out among the students. Many immediately looked toward Samantha and the other humans in the room. "The objective," Professor Zixthun continued, "is to create a residential module capable of maintaining function during multiple simultaneous system failures. You will be judged not on elegance or efficiency, but on survivability and adaptation." Teams formed quickly, with humans dispersed among them. Samantha found herself working with Keldor, who had become one of her closest friends at the Academy, along with students from 5 other species. "I propose we start with the human approach as our foundation," Keldor suggested, "then enhance it with our species' unique perspectives." For the next 2 weeks, the teams worked intensely on their projects. Samantha's team created a hybrid habitat that combined Earth's robust redundancy with crystalline energy distribution systems inspired by Keldor's biology, atmospheric processing from the gas-dwelling Zoral, and structural elements from 3 other worlds. When testing day arrived, the results exceeded all expectations. Designs that would have been dismissed as too bulky or inefficient a year ago now demonstrated remarkable survivability under extreme conditions. The teams had created truly hybrid approaches, taking the best elements from different worlds. Professor Zixthun moved from project to project, examining each with growing satisfaction. "This," he announced to the class, "represents the future of galactic engineering. Not one approach dominating another, but a synthesis of perspectives. Deathworld pragmatism balanced with the elegance of stable world design. At the graduation ceremony a week later, the Academy auditorium was filled to capacity. The engineering students were highlighted as special achievers, with their projects displayed prominently for visitors to examine. The Academy Chancellor approached the podium. Before we present the standard graduation honors, we have an unprecedented award to announce. The Paradigm Shift Award, traditionally reserved for career academics who revolutionize their fields, will this year be presented to a student. Murmurs of surprise spread through the audience. "Samantha Wells," the Chancellor called. "Please join me." Stunned, Samantha made her way to the stage. "Your perspective challenged centuries of established practice," the Chancellor said, presenting a crystalline award that shimmered with internal light. "You showed us not a better way, but a different way, one we needed to learn." Given the opportunity to speak, Samantha looked out at the diverse assembly of beings from across the galaxy. "Earth's harsh conditions didn't make humans better engineers," she said simply. "They just forced us to consider what could go wrong before celebrating what goes right. The greatest lesson I've learned here is that no single approach is perfect. The elegant designs of stable worlds combined with the robust preparedness of death worlds create something stronger than either alone." As she returned to her seat, the applause continued for several minutes. After the ceremony, Samantha found herself surrounded by representatives from research institutions across the galaxy, all extending invitations to continue her work with them. Professor Zixthun approached her through the crowd. "You have received offers from the 12 most prestigious engineering groups in the Federation," he noted, mandibles clicking happily. "An unprecedented achievement for any student, let alone a first year. I couldn't have done it without your willingness to consider different approaches," Samantha told him sincerely. "Perhaps that is the most important lesson," the professor replied. "Even teachers must remain students." Later that evening, as the graduation celebrations continued, Samantha stood by a viewport, looking out at the stars. Soon she would return to Earth for the summer break before beginning her new role in the permanent exchange program. The term Deathworlder had transformed from a term of concern to one of respect among the engineering community. Alex joined her at the viewport. "Did you see the Chancellor's announcement? They're implementing Deathworld design principles in the next generation of Federation starships." Samantha smiled. "It's strange to think that growing up on a planet that tried to kill us every day would turn out to be an advantage." Professor Zixthun, passing by, overheard her comment. He paused and regarded the two humans thoughtfully before offering his final assessment, a statement that would become famous in engineering circles throughout the galaxy. "Perhaps we should stop asking how Deathworlders survived their planets and start asking why the rest of us built civilizations that couldn't."